Hey guys, welcome back. I am Ashish and today I am starting a new module 7, that is nothing but Comparative Public Administration. So before going ahead, let me address something in just 2 minutes. First of all, thank you very much for all the support and appreciation that you guys have shown in the comments, in the emails, in the YouTube private messages. Thank you again, thank you very much. I will be forever grateful to you guys for that. Secondly, I want to apologize to you guys because I was unable to post videos due to personal reasons, and I want to say that going forward also I know that my schedule will become more tight in coming days, and I know this for sure, and so I also realize that I may not be able to upload more videos after this module is over, this module being Comparative Public Administration module, and this might be the last module that I upload, at least for 2017 mains batch, and it kills me from inside to stop doing this. Trust me on this, I love doing this, and it breaks my heart to stop making more sessions, and I am really sorry for that. I am really sorry for that. So having said that, we'll move on with today's session, and as I always say, if this is the first video that you are watching, please stop right now and watch all the previous videos of module 1 and module 2 and watch them in order to grasp fully what we are learning today, because I will definitely be using some terms and definition and explanations which I have already dealt with in my previous modules. So please go watch that first. Links for the same would be in the description of my video, and notes for this session will be available on the app after this module is over. As always, after I complete this module, I will make the notes available. So moving on with today's session, we'll learn about ecological approach. So before diving into comparative public administration, it is important for us to learn what ecological approach is, because it is a very popular approach and it is very widely used in comparative public administration. Even the thinker whom we learn about in CPA, who is nothing but Fred W. Ricks, even he used ecological approach in his analysis. So ecological approach is something we should learn about, and we'll learn about it in this session. So we'll learn about the origins and meanings of ecological approach. As you already know from your subject of environment and ecology, what ecology basically is, it is a branch of biology, and the term ecology was coined in 1866 by Ernst Haeckel. This everything you have learned in ecology, and ecology basically deals with the relation between living organisms and their environment, which is nothing but biotic and abiotic environment. So everything you have learned this in ecology. So what we have done is we have taken this term ecology from biology and we have put it use in public administration. So the term ecology is borrowed from biology and applied to the study of public administration. Administrative ecology, as opposed to ecology of biology, administrative ecology is concerned with the interactions and interconnections between the administrative system and the social system within which public administration is embedded. So we know ecology of biology is nothing but interactions and interrelations between living beings and their environment, right? In a similar way, administrative ecology is also interrelations and interconnections between administration and its environment, which is nothing but society. It is nothing but the social system. So interactions between the administrative system and the social system is nothing but administrative ecology, and this social system is that society within which the public administration is embedded. There are different countries, India, USA, France. So there are different societies, Indian society, French society, and within these societies the administration is embedded. So the relations between those administration and the societies is nothing but administrative ecology. Thus the ecological approach examines the links and interdependencies between an administrative system and its environment, which consists of 4 factors: social, economic, cultural and political factors. And in today's session we are going to learn in detail about how these 4 factors affect administrative system, and administrative system in turn affects them also. So we are going to see this both ways, kind of interdependencies and links between the administrative system and its environment with these 4 factors of social factor, political factor, cultural factor and economic factor. In other words, an administrative system is not only influenced by its various environmental factors, but also it affects them. So it works both ways. Not only the environment affects administration, the administration also affects the environment and the society. So it affects both ways. Ecological approach has been emphasized by several scholars such as John M. Gaus, Robert Dahl, Roscoe Martin and Fred W. Ricks. Now this person, Fred W. Ricks, is considered as father of comparative public administration. So we are going to learn about him in detail in comparative public administration module itself. And about Robert Dahl, we have learned about him in behavioral approach. If you remember, he is a behavioralist. So we have learned about Robert Dahl in behavioral approach. And John M. Gaus is someone who is associated with CPA, and Roscoe Martin is also someone associated with CPA. CPA. Thus we can say that ecological approach, which is a post World War II development, is given much importance in the study of comparative public administration today, because all of these scholars are comparative public administration scholars, and hence ecological approach has been given much importance in the study of CPA, that is nothing but comparative public administration. So I hope this origins and meaning is clear to you. It is very simple. So moving on with the views of John M. Gaus. So John M. Gaus was the first person who proposed the ecological approach. As you can see, the ecological approach to public administration was first proposed by John M. Gaus in his reflections on public administration in 1947. Now you have to understand something, that 1947, if you remember from our paradigms lecture, this was the same period when there was a crisis of identity of public administration, because everyone was questioning and rejecting the old and traditional ways, right? The principle driven approach, the formal structure driven approach. So all those principles of administration and everything were being rejected, and there was a crisis of identity sort of thing during these times. And this was the same time when behavioral approach came to rise, when human relations approach came to rise, and after 10 years we see new public administration, and after that we see new public management and whatnot. So try to relate everything with whatever we have learned till now, because everyone was rejecting the traditional and old principle driven approach. People were coming up with new ideas, and it is during this time that John M. Gaus came up with his idea of ecological approach. He said that we have to take the environment, the society also into consideration. We cannot just be principle driven and rules driven. सब कुछ ऐसे principle और rule वाला नहीं हो सकता. आपको society को भी consider करना पड़ेगा, आपको ecology और environment को भी consider करना पड़ेगा. And this ecology is not the ecology of biology, as we have already studied. This is administrative ecology we are talking about. So this happened in 1947. John M. Gaus was the first person who proposed ecological approach, and he said that the study of public administration must include its ecology. This is a very famous statement by John M. Gaus. Whichever book on ecological approach of public administration you pick up, you will find this statement. It was made by John M. Gaus in 1947 in his book, and this has become very famous, that public administration must include its ecology. According to Gaus, there are 7 environmental factors. Because he was the first person to come up with this theory, his factors that he has given, 7 environmental factors, are not those very much detailed. Okay, as you can see, those 7 environmental factors that he talks about is people, place, catastrophe, personality, physical technology, social technology, and all these things he talks about. These are the 7 environmental factors that he talks about. He was the first person to come up with this approach, right? So his factors are not that very detailed. So for exam also, you need not remember these 7 environmental factors. Do not waste your time in remembering these 7 environmental factors. Even if in exam you have to write about John M. Gaus, you can write that he gave 7 environmental factors, and you can say people, place, personality, etc., etc. He stressed the importance of ecology in explaining administrative behavior also. As I have already said to you before, that this was also the time when behavioral approach was also on the rise. So what John M. Gaus said, that we can explain administrative behavior also by ecological approach. You can not only explain administrative systems. These are the 7 factors that explain system, right? Administration को explain करने के लिए John M. Gaus ने ये 7 factor दिए, and he also said that apart from analyzing the administration itself, we can also analyze administrative behavior, how administrators behave inside the administration. That also we can analyze by ecological approach. He was the first person to say this. Gaus urged that the future research should relate various non-administrative factors to formal administrative elements. So up till the time of John Gaus, everything was so formal and everything was so principles and rules driven, right? So he said that we should also relate various non-administrative factors to the formal factors that we are already considering. उनके साथ हमको non-administrative factors भी consider करने पड़ेंगे. So these are the views of John M. Gaus. I hope this is clear to you. This is very simple. We'll now move to views of Robert Dahl in the context of comparative public administration. In his 1947 essay, Robert Dahl stressed the need for cross-cultural studies. Now this cross-cultural studies means comparative public administration. We'll learn about cross-cultural studies when we learn about comparative public administration in detail, so do not worry about that. But Robert Dahl in 1947 stressed for the need of comparative public administration, that is nothing but cross-cultural studies. And he also referred to the environmental effects on administrative structure and behavior. So apart from propagating comparative public administration, he also propagated the ecological approach. He said that environmental effects on administrative behavior and structure should also be considered. So this happened in 1947. Robert Dahl did this, and remember John M. Gaus also gave his essay in 1947, and Robert Dahl gave after him. John M. Gaus is considered as the first person to do the ecological approach. He observed that public administration could not escape the effects of national psychology and of the political, social and cultural environment in which it developed. So as we have already seen, there are various factors of an environment which affects the administration, right? What are these factors? There is a political environmental factor, social environmental factor, cultural environmental factor. So all these factors affect public administration, and Robert Dahl is also saying the same thing. And he also says that national psychology also plays an important part. We'll deal about national psychology also when we deal with political environment and its effect on administration. We'll deal with national psychology part also, so do not worry about this. So this is something that Robert Dahl said. Dahl would point out that cultural factors could make public administration on one part of the globe quite different from public administration on another. So because there are different countries, for example, let's say India has a different culture than USA, which has a different culture. So because these two cultures are different, public administration on one part of the globe will always be different from another part of the globe, because administration is embedded in culture. As you can see, Dahl pointed out that cultural factors could make public administration on one part of the globe quite different from public administration on another. Because cultures are different, administration of those countries or different areas of globe will also be different. So these are the views of Robert Dahl. Also there are the views of Fred Ricks, and we'll learn about Fred Ricks when we learn about him in detail. We'll move on to our actual discussion. The four factors that we have to consider, right? Social, political, economic and cultural. So we'll consider the first factor, how culture affects administration and how administration affects culture. So these two slides that will come up will deal with culture and administration. So this is a very famous statement. You will find it being used very often, that administration is culture bound. What this means is, we'll see. Since public administration is culture bound or shaped by its setting or environment, so whatever the setting or environment that the administration is, that environment shapes the administration. So public administration is culture bound or it is shaped by its setting or environment, and since this is so, it develops its own peculiar characteristics in different cultural areas or environment. The same thing that we studied about Robert Dahl, that administration in one part of the globe will be different than the administration on another because the cultures are different. And because public administration is culture bound, because it is shaped by its culture, it is shaped by its environment, and it is shaped by its setting, and that is why administrations will be different. It will develop its own peculiar characteristics in different cultures. So I hope this is clear to you. Though there is manifest similarity in formal organizations of various nations, yet their informal and behavioral patterns possess considerable diversities, each being shaped by its societal culture. So there may be similarities in the formal part of the organization in all over the world. Also, if you consider, there might be similarities in the formal part, the hierarchy, the chain of command and all those things. The formal part of the organization might be same, but the informal and behavioral patterns of these organization will contain considerable diversities. These will be different. The informal and behavior of the administrators will be different in different cultures because it is being shaped by that society's culture. That societal culture shapes those informal and behavioral patterns. On account of these diversities itself, Fred W. Ricks classified social structures into three types: fused, prismatic and diffracted, and outlined the peculiar characteristics of administration in each of these categories. So did not worry about this statement. We'll study about Fred W. Ricks and we'll study about these structures also, fused, prismatic and diffracted. What I am trying to say in this point is that since there are differences, we saw in above point that there are differences in public administration of different nations, right? And Fred W. Ricks, what he did was, when he analyzed different countries and he analyzed public administration, he considered these differences, and on these differences itself he gave the classification of his three types of structures. So we'll learn about these structures of Fred W. Ricks. Do not worry about that. We'll learn about it in this module itself. So we'll see some examples of administration being culture bound. We are saying that administration is culture bound, right? We'll see some examples how it is culture bound. So in Africa we find kinship organization or house societies. It is an actual thing. You can Google this. Kinship organization or house societies are found in Africa in different cultures. What this means is, political relations are organized around membership in corporately organized dwellings. So in different cultures of Africa you will find that there are certain dwellings or house societies, and if you are a member of these house societies, only then you can have a political clout or you can enter politics. If you are a member of these dwellings, if you want to enter politics in these cultures of Africa, you will have to be a member of these house societies or dwellings. So this is how administration of these areas are culture bound. I hope this is getting clear to you. Preference. Now this example is of Nigeria. Preference is given in the recruitment into services to local people in northern Nigeria, and a significant number of southern Nigerians are dismissed, particularly Ibos, from the northern service. So in northern Nigeria we find that preference is given given to northern Nigerians in administration. This is how it is culture bound. The reasons for this are both political and cultural. Even though in India the civil service was developed by the British on certain principles, and these principles are general competence, integrity and impartiality, and political neutrality. These are certain principles that British had founded our own civil service. Our civil service was developed on these principles, but still the nature and role of Indian bureaucracy cannot be understood in terms of these ideal norms, but must be studied in terms of their social and cultural traditions and orientations. So even if our civil service is developed on these certain ideal principles, we cannot study the nature and role of our civil service solely based on these ideal principles. We have to study in terms of our society, our culture, our traditions and everything. So this is how administration is culture bound. Even in Western economically developed countries, which are often grouped into one category, public administration has not developed and function in a uniform pattern. So what we tend to do is, whenever we study any theory, we study these terms like Western nations or developed nations or economically developed countries, right? So we tend to group them into one group, like Western countries. These are the group of countries which are called Western countries, or a group of economically developed countries. So we tend to group them into one group. So even when we do that, we find that administration has not developed in a uniform pattern. Even in this group that we say that these are all developed countries do not have the same pattern of administration. And for example, we'll see British and German patterns of administration, both of whom are developed, and we consider them as European nations. So we'll see the differences between them. Britain is the example of entrepreneurial society in which management tended to remain personal, taking decisions through personal bargaining and negotiation rather than through a bureaucratic imposition of authority. Germany has the institutionalized bureaucratic style of administration. Bureaucracy is the dominant form of social organization. So if you remember Max Weber's model of ideal type of bureaucracy, Max Weber was a German scholar, if you remember that. So obviously German society has followed on the footsteps of Max Weber, and what you find in Germany is the typical bureaucracy, what Max Weber talked about, the institutionalized bureaucratic style. Bureaucracy is the dominant form of social organization in Germany. So in Germany you will find the typical bureaucratic style, but in Britain you will not find that typical bureaucracy. You will find that it is an entrepreneurial society, and hence the decisions that are taken within the bureaucracy in Britain are also personal. Administrators do not rely completely on bureaucratic imposition of authority. As you can see, administrators in Britain do not rely completely on bureaucratic imposition of authority. How administrators take decisions in Britain is still through personal bargaining and negotiations. Even if the formal structure might be same, even if there is a bureaucracy and everything, inside the bureaucracy the behavior is different. I hope these examples are clear to you how administration is culture bound, how culture defines the administration in different regions of the world. This is how administration is culture bound. So moving on, we will now see interaction between culture and public administration. We have seen how administration is culture bound, no denying that fact that administration is culture bound. Now we'll study how exactly culture affects administration. So cultural values of a society are not immutable. What do you mean by immutable? That which does not change. Mutation का मतलब होता है change होना. I hope you know this term, mutation. Mutation means something which undergoes change. That is nothing but mutation. So what is immutable? Immutable is that which does not change. ठीक है, जो change नहीं होता, that is immutable. So cultural values of societies are not immutable. तो इसका मतलब है culture keeps on changing with time. ऐसा नहीं है कि culture same रहता है. 100 साल तक एक ही culture नहीं रहेगा. Culture will develop with time. It will evolve with time. So cultural values of a society are not immutable. That means they are changeable. They change over the course of time. They are not immutable. Culture is subject to change, and there is a constant interaction of culture and administration, and that redefines the role of government and public administration. So since culture is subject to change, it also redefines the role of government and public administration, because as we saw in our previous slide, administration is culture bound. So since culture is changing, administration will also change with time. Government will also change with time, because everything is connected to culture. It is culture bound. For example, we'll take one example. The latitude of action allowed at present to governments and public administration in the Western countries would have been unthinkable before the two world wars, one major economic depression, and a Cold War, which fundamentally altered popular perceptions of the role of government. So you might have studied this in economy, that before the Great Depression, whatever the kind of administration was there in USA, it was the typical typical capitalist administration where private companies were given more freedom. It was the theory of Adam Smith, if you remember, Adam Smith's theory of invisible hand of private enterprises and everything. So that was there before 1929, and then happened 1929, the Great Depression, and then everything changed. Then came your Keynesian theory of mixed economy and everything. So with time the culture has changed, the perception of people, the popular perception of people of what role a government should play has changed, and this has changed the administration also. So I hope this is clear to you. Cultures are changing with time, and so administration and governments also change with time. The interaction between culture and public administration is not unidirectional. We have discussed this all our previous slides. We have said this so many times that it is not unidirectional. It is not that only culture will affect administration or only society or only politics. It is bidirectional, rather it is bilateral, that both affect each other. Administration will affect culture and culture will in turn affect administration also. It is the public administrations which are playing modernizing and catalytic roles in many countries of Asia and Africa. So we have seen how administration is culture bound, right? How culture defines administration and how culture is shaping administration. Now we'll see how administration is shaping the culture. As we can see, in many countries of Asia and Africa, after they gained independence, after decolonization, in many countries of Asia and Africa, public administration is the one which is playing modernizing role and catalytic role. So administration is in fact affecting the culture. It is making that culture more modern. It is playing a modernizing role and a catalytic role. It is changing those cultures. So this is how administration is also affecting the cultures. Just as culture itself is not unchanging, that means culture itself changes, administrative culture too keeps on changing. Administrative culture must be compatible with its environment. It is therefore unrealistic to endorse and perpetuate the administrative culture operative during the period of British rule in independent India. So because culture keeps on changing, administrative culture also keeps on changing. So it will be futile, as we have seen in this last point, it will be futile to endorse what administration was there in British India in independent India, because administrative culture also changes, right? So we cannot endorse the same administrative culture of British India in independent India, because times have changed, culture has changed, and so administrative culture should also undergo change. So this is all that this point says. It is a bidirectional thing. It is not unidirectional. Since public administration is culture bound, it follows that the structure of public administration of one environmental setting cannot be transplanted into a different cultural milieu. So we have seen this all over our previous slides, that administration in one country will be different from administration in another country. It is the same thing, because cultures are different. You cannot just transplant one administration into another country. तो ये transplant आप कर नहीं सकते कि आपने उठा के same administration वहाँ पे रख दिया, ऐसा हो नहीं सकता. An example for this is American effort to export scientific public administration have met with negative responses, not only in such widely dispersed places like Pakistan, Vietnam, Turkey, Brazil, but also in Western European countries like Italy as well. So these are the examples that American effort to transplant और अपना administration उठा के वहाँ पे as it is apply कर दो, ऐसा हो नहीं सकता. This is the example for that countries are different, cultures are different, so you cannot just transplant one administration into another country. The experience of Professor Rix in Thailand and the Philippines is that the attempts to import Western concepts into non-Western world have often resulted in the adoption of formal aspects of bureaucracy, but the older institutional base of a traditional society lingers on. He calls it a dualistic situation. So what Fred W. Rix has done is, when he studied about Thailand and Philippines, he found out that there were attempts to import Western administration into those countries of Thailand and Philippines. So when you are trying to import something into another country as it is, what happens is there is adoption of formal aspects, formal organization और जो structure है वो तो adopt हो जाता है, but still the older institutional base of traditional society, it is still there, and he calls it a dualistic situation. This is dualistic situation according to Fred W. Rix, that you cannot just import something into another country. वो traditional base जो होता है वो रहता ही है कहीं ना कहीं, it still lingers on. It is a dualistic situation. He develops a model of such a dualistic administration called the Sala model of administration in prismatic society. So ये dualistic principle के ऊपर Fred W. Rix ने Sala model बनाया. We'll learn about Sala model when we learn about Fred W. Rix in more detail. Do not worry about this. Fred W. Rix we are going to study about in this module itself. So this is what cultural environment and its effect on public administration and vice versa. So we are done with one factor, that is culture, how culture affects administration, and vice versa, how administration also affects culture. We have seen this in our last two slides, and we are done with culture. We'll move with one big topic now, political environment, how political politics affects administration. And you have to remember that before culture and society, all these terms came into work, politics was always there. If you remember politics administration dichotomy, ये debate तो बहुत पहले से चल रहा है कि politics is affecting administration and everything. ये debate तो बहुत पहले से चल रहा है. Culture society तो बाद में आया, वो crisis of identity के बाद, you know, when behavioral theories came up, when human relations theory came up, when ecological approach came up, then we see how culture is affecting and how society is affecting. But how politics is affecting, this is a very very old debate, और ये काफ़ी बड़ा debate है. So this slide and upcoming 2 slides will deal with how political environment affects administration and vice versa. So public administration and political environment are closely related. How the roots of public administration can be traced to politics of the country, and while politics is concerned with government, the practical implementation of government policy assumes the form of public administration. So these two are closely related. One fact is that the roots of public administration is traced to politics of the country. ठीक है, this is how public administration is related to politics. The roots of public administration can be traced to politics, and while politics is concerned with government, but there are government policies to be implemented, right? So ये implement कौन करता है? Administration implement करता है. So this is how politics is in turn related with administration. So both are related with each other. It is therefore natural that the change in political environment leads to changes in administrative institutions. तो अगर political environment में change होगा, politics change होगी, government change होगी, तो administration भी change होगा. I'll give you an example. Let's say today we are a democracy, and consider that 100 years or 200 years down the line we convert into a autocracy. ठीक है, एक autocratic rule आ गया 200 साल बाद इंडिया में. So what will happen is administration in that autocratic rule will be more centralized. आज के ज़माने में when we have a democratic political environment, we have a decentralized administration, right? So what will happen when we have autocratic political environment? The administration will become centralized. So if political environment changes, administrative institutions will also undergo change. It is but obvious, right? And we'll consider this political environment and its effect under various headings. So first heading we'll consider is loyalty to national community, and this is something that even Robert Dahl talked about. If you remember, we have studied this while we were studying views of Robert Dahl, that he had talked about national psychology. So this is nothing but national psychology, loyalty to national community. So how it affects politics? This loyalty to national community, it affects politics, and the politics in turn affects administration. We'll see this now. Loyalties to family, language, religion, caste or ethnic group diminish individual commitment to national political system and produce the potential for political unrest and instability. So this is but obvious that in everyday life as human being, we tend to give more importance to our family, our language, our region, our caste, our religion. So all these things we give more importance to. So what happens is, when we give more importance to these loyalties of region, religion, caste and everything, our national loyalty gets diminished. So these loyalties of family, language and everything diminish individual commitment to national political system and produce potential for political unrest and instability. And this is what we are seeing in India happening in current times also, right? There are various communal riots happening all over the country. There are various demands for separate states, for example Gorkha land in West Bengal and Sikkim, or you consider Vidarbha in Maharashtra. So what is happening is, too much of importance or loyalty is being attached to a particular region, language or religion, and what is happening is our national loyalty is getting diminished, and this produces political unrest and political instability. So what happens when we have political instability? We have serious consequences for administration from a low level of national commitment. Our low level of national commitment will have serious consequences, first of which is such a society will suffer from social dissensions. Society में झगड़े होंगे, riots होंगे, right? So there will be differences within the society. So such a society will suffer from social dissensions, and in such situations political decision making becomes very difficult. When there is such differences within the society, political decision making becomes very difficult, and this tends to direct power upwards towards bureaucracy. Now what do you mean by decentralization? Is decentralization means powers and responsibilities and authority is being given to lower levels. But imagine that there is so much of difference between the lower levels of administration itself. ठीक है, सब झगड़े हो रहे हैं, riots हो रहे हैं, the lower levels of administration are at clash with each other, so there is no point in giving more power to them, right? So what will this do is, it will direct power upwards. ठीक है, फिर वो सेंट्रलाइज होने लगेगी पावर, क्योंकि नीचे वाले लेवल तो सब आपस में झगड़ा कर रहे हैं, सोसाइटी पूरी डिफरेंशिएटेड है, डिफ्रैक्टेड है, तो डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन नहीं होगा. दैट पावर विल नाउ गेट डायरेक्टेड अपवर्ड्स टुवर्ड्स ब्यूरोक्रेसी. देयर विल बी अ टेंडेंसी ऑफ सेंट्रलाइजेशन नाउ, एंड दिस इज बिकॉज आर लो लेवल ऑफ national commitment. We give more importance to a certain religion and caste and language and region, and this is why this is happening. The decision making by bureaucracy adversely affects his impartiality also. तो अगर सोसाइटी में झगड़े हो रहे हैं तो आपकी impartiality भी चली जाएगी. एज अ सिविल सर्वेंट, एज एन IAS officer, if you are posted in a district, or let's say that district is right stricken, or there are clashes happening between different caste or different societies, so your impartiality will also get affected. This is what happens when you have a low level of national commitment. So I hope you are understanding how administration is getting affected. First of all, it is getting centralized. Second of all, its impartiality is getting affected. And examples for this is France in Fourth Republic and modern Italy, and several developing countries also fall in this category. So France in Fourth Republic, this is outside our scope of syllabus. Fourth Republic of France is nothing but the government of France from 1946 to 1958. This span of 12 years is nothing but Fourth Republic, and after 1958 what came was Fifth Republic, which is continuing even today. So this Fourth Republic falls under this low level of national commitment, and this is outside our scope of syllabus. Even in world history we do not study about Fourth Republic. So I'll explain to you what Fourth Republic was, but do not remember this for exam. It is not at all important for exam. Just to give you a perspective, I am giving you an example. So during this 12 years of Fourth Republic of France from 1946 to 1958, there were some 21 administrative changes. 12 साल में 21 एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन चेंज हो गई. ठीक है, तो इतना वहाँ पे क्राइसिस हो रहे थे, सब हो रहा था. सो एवरीथिंग वाज इन chaos. दिस इज what Fourth Republic of France is remembered for. So this is outside our scope of syllabus. Again, you do not need to remember this, but I hope the message is clear that what happens when there is a low level of national commitment, when there is a low level of loyalty to national community, or the national psychology, as if we use the words of Robert Dahl, national psychology.